Welcome to Under the Basswood Tree with Basswood Counsel, a podcast where we bring you brief, valuable conversations and insights to help you navigate the complex world of business transactions. From cross-border deals to international tax structuring, we cover topics across all industries. Our team and colleagues will share their insights and provide practical tips on key issues for you and your business. Let's get started.
Welcome back to Under the Basswood Tree, and I am Renee Thune, your host for today. And today we'll be digging into transfer pricing, how multinational companies set prices for transactions between their own related entities across borders, across countries, and why that matters for taxes, financial reporting, and strategy. To help us talk through this, we have Christopher Klug, one of our partners at Basswood Counsel. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Renee. Thanks, everyone, for joining. We're Basswood Counsel, or the Basswood Tax, built for what's next. And Renee, thanks for taking the time to meet with me today.
Yeah, sure. So let's just get into it. What is transfer pricing, really?
Well, if you think about it, a long time ago, businesses were not global. And so you would do all the functions of a business in one area, probably very local, not even, in the U.S. between states, all within one very local area. Now businesses are global. They're either entering new markets or they're performing different functions in different places. And left to itself, these businesses could use tax rates in various countries to reduce overall tax, even though maybe more products are being manufactured in one, more sales are occurring in another, more research and development's happening in a different country. And left to their own means, a business is supposed to maximize profits, which includes trying to minimize taxes. And so what used to happen is perhaps a business would form a company maybe in a no tax jurisdiction and really have no substance there. And then they would say, oh, well, that's actually where all the profits created, and boom, no tax. And obviously over time, that doesn't work. New rules get created. And from a tax perspective, that the price that's charged between companies that are related, like U.S. Corp and its subs, or foreign corp and its U.S. subs, what they're charging each other for different components, that's a transfer price. And over time, the tax authorities really dig into this because they understand that companies will try to, I won't say manipulate, but they will try to use, say, more activities maybe happening in one country than the other in order to reduce overall taxation. So transfer pricing rules tried to stop that from happening. And there's no perfect system because we're dealing with all the countries in the world where one business and all of its related companies may be operating. And if you think of something like this also occurs between states in the United States, because we have 50 jurisdictions plus the District of Columbia to deal with, goods, services being sold across borders. So when we're looking at transfer pricing, we want to break down the business into components. Where are the sales of goods happening? Where are the goods being manufactured? What are other intragroup services? Is the management of the operations happening in one company? So where's the management, technical, administrative support happening? Is there research and development? Where's that occurring? And licensing of intangibles is a big one because that's very paper. You can just say, oh, the trademark was registered in this country, and therefore all the payments for trademarks go there. So you're looking at licensings of intangibles, technology, marketable, intangible. So you want to make sure that the price is fair. At the end of the day, we want an arm's length price, which I know we'll get into. And, each of these separate dealings between the related parties, that's called the transfer price. And the goal is to make that sure that's fair, that there's, from the tax authority's point of view, that the right amount of tax is paid in each country, from kind of a fiscal treasury perspective of an international group, that they're not paying any more taxes than they should, and the same income's not being double taxed across borders, which can happen again because they have different transfer pricing mechanisms in different countries.
So you mentioned the arm's length rule just now. Do you want to explain more about that?
Yeah, so arm's length would be kind of the price at which these goods would be transferred to an unrelated party. So what are you selling these goods, or what are you selling these services to companies or end consumers that are not related parties? And that's kind of the goal of, that would be the perfect benchmark. If for every little one of these transactions, management services, accounting services, administrative services, research and development. If you were doing those functions for an unrelated party, what would the charge be? And that's what transfer pricing is trying to get at. And that's the struggle because, again, you got the tax authorities in every country whose job is to maximize tax revenue. So their mind is more should be paid into that country. And you got the business perspective and, the directors of a company or the officers of a company have a duty to maximize profits for shareholders. And part of that is minimizing taxes. And so you have this tension. And so, you want to come up with this. So that's why it's really important because the government agencies that enforce tax in each country take this very seriously. They want to see sometimes transfer pricing studies. They want to make sure the price is fair and that their country is getting the tax they should. And you got the business side that, they don't want to evade tax by any means, but they want to minimize tax in a fair way. And so how do you go about doing that? You want it documented. And so it's really, how do you show what that arm's length price is that would be paid between unrelated parties?
So in a way, you would look at how these companies would deal with each other as if they were independent, separate companies.
Correct. You would want to look at how they would sell if they were independent. And so you want to look at, a lot of times you look at comparable transactions if we're talking about sales of goods or products. But that could be really hard because you got to look at the contractual terms and it's really hard to find the exact contractual terms for the exact product for different companies. And so comparability is one key factor. The other is you got to focus on, you want good data quality and you want to make the right assumptions. And at the end of the day, this could be really hard to do. A lot of times with services and certain others, there's a cost plus model where what's the actual cost of those services and what's the proper markup on those services that should be charged. And that could be a little easier if it's in a situation where that can work, maybe administrative support. You can do a cost plus 10%, could be whatever the markup is. But again, the goal is how do you get something that's fair, something that it's kind of a sound transfer pricing strategy. For a multi-billion-dollar company with transactions all around the world, they can probably afford to do a lot of expensive transfer pricing studies to support each different transfer price within units of the business. For smaller companies that maybe only have $1 million of transactions that go outside the US or that come into the US, how do you put together a sound strategy that makes sense that you can show that through documentation that you've taken steps to try to ensure that the transfer price is fair between the countries?
So you mentioned something about comparability just now. How do you say what specifically makes two transactions comparable?
Well, in the ideal world, they'd be identical. Same product, same everything, contract terms exactly the same. But in reality, that doesn't really exist. So you're going to go through some factors. One of them would be functions performed. Who's doing the research and development? Where's the manufacturing occurring? Where's the distribution? Who's doing the marketing? Warehousing of products, administrative. The more valuable the service to the value creation, the more that the income should be attributed to that unit of the business. Then you want to look at the risks assumed. Who's responsible to end users if something goes wrong? Who's responsible to third parties if there's a lawsuit? So you want to look at what are the risks assumed? Who bears the risk of research and development success or failure? Foreign currency and interest rate swing, credit risk, product liability, or market volatility. So the more risks that one of these units within this parent substructure takes on, the more that unit should get income assigned to it. What are the contractual terms? Quantities, currency, warranties, rights to updates, contract rate, collateral arrangements, payment terms. This a lot of times can create economic differences that make true comparable transactions where there's no arm's length. Having it contractually documented is very important. And then what are the economic conditions and market? Geography, market level, industries, are there realistic alternatives? And the economic conditions a lot of times make the comparability analysis difficult to analyze a lot. And then nature of property or service. What are the product characteristics and service scope matter, especially for transaction-based methods? So you kind of take all these factors into consideration and when you're doing it, figuring out a transfer price, you want to think through these. And for each unit and for each separate kind of transfer price activity that's occurring.
Sounds like there is a lot to think about when you want to impose a fair transfer price. So once you've picked a method, how do you land the number? What's the actual fair price, you would say?
Well, what you can hopefully find is multiple reliable comparables. So that just focusing on one, hopefully you can find a number of comparables, even if they're not exactly similar, that you can pull together and kind of get a range. And that kind of establishes an arm's length range. For transfer pricing, they have what's called an interquartile range, and at least in the US. And if what you select falls within the interquartile range, then your transfer price should be respected. And so again, finding the reliable comparables and having that, and then being able to set the price within it. What the IRS will try to do in the US, if they make an adjustment, would be to set the price in the middle of that interquartile range. And again, we make it sound so simple. There's an interquartile range, but you have to have the right data. Well, the IRS think it's the right data. Will a business try to manipulate what those comparables are to get a result that they like? And so all I can say is that, to be fair, you want to have good, clean data that really establishes what the market is for what's being priced.
So, in this day and age, we can see how the markets are so volatile. One year you have a good year and the next year it's not a great year. So how do you counter that?
So what you want to do is not focus on any one year. If your company's been around, maybe it's what's being sold or whatever that might be impacted by market conditions. You want to look at multiple years of data in deciding what the right price might be. And say on comparables, if you can get multiple years of data for arm's length transactions to base your transfer price, that'll reduce short-term swings in the market and allow for more reliable transfer pricing being set.
That sounds like a lot of things to think about. That's why we should be a good reference point to help with our listeners with transfer pricing issues. Sounds like we are at the end of our episode this time. So before we wrap, let's give a quick checklist of what companies can use.
To start with, customize the transfer pricing strategies particular to each business and its unit. You might have a parent with 1 sub. You might have a parent with 60 subs. You might have a parent with 1,000 subs. And so there's no one size fits all. So it's important especially for professionals, consultants, such as lawyers, to think about the size and scope of operations, profile the intercompany transactions, countries that are involved in their rules. And so you're going to need other professionals involved. And the company's risk tolerance and documentation approach. And I'm a big fan of documentation. So you want to have a lot of documentation. You want to make sure everything's contracted and documented. So we work with businesses of, companies of all size. So there's no one size fits all. And I think too often professionals treat transactions as it's the same as every other transaction they ever done. Transfer pricing is very customized, and it's important to focus kind of on where the company is at and the size and scope is big. What are some key takeaways? So what a company wants to do is map their value chain. Who performs key function and who bears the major risk? Choose the best method based on data quality and comparability, not just the results you want. Document and have agreements in place that sets forth these transfer pricing. Make sure you have good data sources and screening criteria. Make sure that the arm's length ranges that you're basing your transfer price on are realistic and that you have good support for them. You don't want to focus on the end of the interquartile range or even be outside of it. You want to make sure that what you set is reasonable. Review it annually. So transfer price, just like the Constitution of the United States, is a living, breathing document. How it means what, now might be different than in the future, but transfer pricing can change. So with the transfer pricing, you want to review to make sure that what's being charged and paid into each country or to each company still is reasonable. A review annually. Business models evolve, comparables age, and market shift. So today, maybe a business is doing a lot in the United States, but maybe one of the subs starts selling more in China, or more R&D is happening in Ireland, or more services are being performed somewhere else. So as the business evolves, the transfer pricing needs to be evolved with it. and align legal agreements with the economic reality and actual conduct of the business. Don't create fictions through contracts because that's where you want profits to be realized. And so, you follow some basic strategies, I would say. Transfer pricing is clearly a complicated area. It requires a lot of assumptions. You can't open up a book and it's going to tell you that's the transfer price. You have to takes actual thought, review of data. But the key is to have a plan and a strategy in place that's realistic.
Thank you, Chris. So it sounds like transfer pricing isn't about perfection. It's about reliability, comparability, and solid documentation that reflects how a business truly works. Thank you for such an insightful conversation. So if you enjoyed this episode, please follow Under the Basswood Tree, leave a review, and share it with a colleague or a friend. Thank you for joining us.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. To stay up to date with the latest legal insights and Basswood events, please follow us on our Basswood Council LinkedIn page and visit our website at www.basswoodcouncil.com. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll speak to you next time.